Welcome, everyone, and thank you for coming to our second Future Insight Talk. Very excited to have this conversation around stewardship and legacy today. I would like to go ahead and thank those who made this talk possible. The guest presenters, of course, we couldn't do this without their support and their sharing their expertise. The American Craft Council staff, who's been amazingly supportive of me in marketing and the IT side of everything. So I think it's really important that we always thank the staff and all the work that they do to make these talks possible. The Wingate Charitable Foundation, who helped us fund this. And because we will get an opportunity for you all to actually engage with the presenters in breakout rooms, you all also are able to make this talk possible. So thank you so much for being here. I'd like to take a moment to recognize the land that ACC occupies. ACC recognizes and acknowledges the traumas of institutional and structural racism and exclusionary practices in the craft sector, and is committed to working toward a more inclusive, just, and equitable world. ACC is committed to amplifying and telling more inclusive narratives that reflect the diverse cultural and social makeup of America. Our headquarters are located in Minneapolis, Minnesota, residing on the traditional, ancestral, and contemporary lands of the Dakota people, land ceded in the treaties of 1837 and 1851, and land partitioned by Pierre Bottineau, son of the Ojibwe woman and French voyager in the 19th century. The Minneapolis and St. Paul metropolitan area is home to one of the largest and most tribally diverse urban American Indian populations, numbering well over 35,000. The Native community of Minneapolis is comprised of many nations, the largest being the Dakota, whose culturally history begins at the confluence of the Minnesota and the Mississippi rivers, which is a sacred place that is called the Bdote, and the Ojibwe, whose homelands extend northward from the city. ACC resides on the land that was cared for and called home by the Ojibwe people, before them the Dakota and the Northern Cheyenne people and other Native peoples from time immemorial. This land holds great historical, spiritual, and personal significance for its original stewards, the Native nations and peoples of this region. We recognize and continually support and advocate for the sovereignty of the Native nations in this territory and beyond. By offering this land acknowledgement, we affirm tribal sovereignty, and we will work to hold the American Craft Council accountable to American Indian peoples and its nations. The American Craft Council connects and galvanizes diverse craft communities to advance craft's impact in contemporary American life. ACC's initiatives have evolved over time and through the pandemic. There are 4 pillars that frame our strategies. The first pillar is public voice for craft. Serving as the nexus of information, ACC is a content producer and the national network builder of building broader audiences who participate in and support craft. Our second pillar is stewardship and legacy, which happens to be the focus of today's conversation. In stewardship and legacy, we document and preserve generational knowledge and support new research and scholarship in the field. Our third talk will be around our third pillar, creative economies. Creative economies, we believe in investing in makers and their entrepreneurial effort so that they can fully live creative and sustainable lives. And woven throughout all 3 of these talks is our fourth pillar, which is social impact and community. ACC believes in investing in and supporting the diverse ways that craft impacts communities and culture, the humanity it evokes, and the future it is creating. The exhibition Crafting America, curated by Jen Paget, Associate Curator at the Crystal Bridges Museum of American Art, and Glenn Adamson, who is guest curator and scholar, defines on their walls what is craft. The term was defined as craft is as simple or complex as you want to make it. In its essence, craft is skilled making on a human scale. For the sake of these conversations, we will be discussing craft with this definition in mind. Future Insights are interactive talks with the audience and are to initiate conversations around specific topics. allowing the craft community to both learn from others and ideate ways both ACC and other craft-focused organizations and individuals can support makers as we strive to understand a post-pandemic world, create equity in the field, and understand the new economy. Future Insight Talks will allow us to listen to craft communities and their needs, develop solutions, and implement and innovate new ways and new ideas for support. Through these talks, we hope to understand what a healthy craft ecology looks like and how this ecology can thrive. Today's talk is talk number 2, the future of stewardship and legacy. This talk will feature a variety of voices that are stewards preserving artist legacies. Today's presenters include Anna Ferriello, the Digital Archives Curator at the Western Carolina University, Angelique Vizcarrondo-Laboy, who is the Assistant Curator at the Museum of Art and Design, Beth Goodrich, who is the American Craft Council Librarian, Dr. Tiffany Moman, founder and co-director of the Black Craftspeople Digital Archive, and Jamie Ann Jacobin, the Executive Director of the James Renwick Alliance for Craft. We will hear individually from each of these presenters and then engage in a group informal conversation. After about 20 minutes of the group conversation, we will then move into breakout rooms with each presenter leading the conversation, and you as the attendees can ask questions, make comments, or share your thoughts with the presenter leading your room. Notes will be taken in each room and shared with the recording after the conclusion of all 3 of our talks. So today's first presenter is Anna Ferriello. And Anna, if you would like to turn your camera on.
Okay.
Great, there you are. All right, so curator and scholar Anna Ferriello is a former Smithsonian Renwick Fellow in American Craft. Her research at the Smithsonian focused on the Southern Craft Revival and led to her work with Western Carolina University, where she developed the Craft Revival Digital Archive. The author of 6 books, numerous book chapters and articles, she has presented over 150 conference papers and invited lectures and directed over 30 grants. Anna has been honored with several awards, including a Lifetime Achievement Award from the Southern Highland Craft Guild, and she currently lives in Cullowhee, North Carolina, not too far from myself. So Anna, thanks for being here today and welcome.
Thank you, Gwen. I should share my screen now, yes?
Yes.
Okay. Well, it's nice to be here. Thank you, Gwen, and the American Craft Council for this opportunity. Gwen gave me a very nice introduction, but I wanted to talk a little bit about how I got to this work. My work with legacy documentation began in 1993, which was the year of American Craft. The National Museum of Women in the Arts hosted a conference that was titled Women and Craft. And unbeknownst to me, this was really the very beginning of my research. I was presenting on craft leaders in my region, including Olive Campbell, who founded the John Campbell Folk School, Lucy Morgan, who founded the Penland School of Craft, Clem Douglas, who founded the Spinning Wheel, which is no longer existing, Charlotte Yale, Eleanor Vance, who founded Biltmore Industries, and several others that just launched me on this path. So because I was working on this craft revival in both North Carolina, but my research focused on Kentucky, Virginia, and some of West Virginia. But this position I took at Western Carolina University was very much interested in the craft revival as it took place in Western North Carolina. So let me turn that off. Okay, this project which was a 4-year project, multi-institutional, created a database of 5,000 items with multiple interpretive essays and several online resources, including a bibliography, lesson plans, glossaries, and links to national organizations. So I'm not sure how many of you know how these digital databases work. There are often, for the ones that I've done, there's the database that runs behind this website, and the website is a portal into the database. So there's actually two very different technical products. So we divided the Craft Revival story into the story, the crafts, the people, and the collections. So the story was about the historic craft institutions that sprung up beginning in the late 1890s, and we cut off in 1945. So the cutoff of 1945 was very specific because obviously World War II, but 1945 was also the year that the American Craft Council was founded. And so this is the story of the more disparate craft movements that were going on before the formation of the American Craft Council. Each of these, so you can see there's a drop-down box. We were focusing on the historic institutions that primarily taught craft or promoted craft. This is an example of Penland School of Craft History, and the navigation bar here shows you others. Besides the very lengthy discussion, one of the very interesting functions of these projects, these digital databases, is that you can flip between the web portal, which is in the front, and the database, which is behind. And by clicking, for example, if you clicked on this Weaving Institute brochure from 1935, you would be able to then read that brochure. The crafts was a section that described the history, context, and a little bit of information on technique on a variety of traditional crafts. And you'll see my work, probably of the whole group, is most focused on tradition, being that, you know, this is the early 20th century. So you can see the variety of crafts that we covered. Also, because weaving played a prominent role, there is a very robust weaving index that identifies over 30 traditional weaving patterns. So this was a piece that is in one of our partner collections, a description here of the this pattern, and then a pullout of what the pattern itself looked like. The people includes in-depth biographies of those who contributed to the craft revival and also makers. So each of these is a drop-down box with basket weavers, Brasstown carvers, Cherokee carvers. And what I tried to use the language of the time, and of the time, these people call themselves mountain workers because all of this took place in the Appalachian Mountains, whether it was as far north of Kentucky and all the way down into Western North Carolina. Here is an example of what one of those essays, the biographies of these mountain workers. This is Doris Ullman. Ullman was neither a maker nor a craft promoter. She was a photographer, but her work was so much of a foundation of what we have to see, how these people looked and worked, and her work is throughout the database. So I wanted to throw out a little digital pitfall that we ran into right there in the beginning. We submitted a press release to the Asheville Citizen-Times, and lo and behold, the photograph, the copyrighted photograph, I might say, that we submitted was offered up on mugs and t-shirts, etc. We had to close that down right away, as you can imagine. So the people included lots of Cherokee people. Where I live is less than an hour from the Qualla boundary, which is the land of the Eastern Band of Cherokee. We had so many Cherokee artisans that we split that off into its own database and website. So this is Cherokee Traditions from the Hands of Our Elders. We organize this in a similar way: arts and crafts, language, different entry portals. The Cherokee Traditions people page has a large number of biographies and several videos that we have that were contributed by Western Carolina's Mountain Heritage Center. The arts and crafts section allows one to choose a craft, an artisan. And then, for example, I'm going to sort of pretend that I clicked on basketry. And this actually well illustrates the difference between the web front page and the database that's functioning behind all of this. So the digital collections database includes numerous collections. You can see some of them listed on the left, and one can search solely in one collection or search across the collections, which makes for some very nice, we had some very nice serendipitous occurrences where we would have in Qualla Arts and Crafts Mutual, which is a Cherokee guild, for example, have photographs of baskets, and the Southern Highland Craft Guild had photographs of those same people making the baskets. And so we were able to pull these stories together into one large database. We worked very closely with the Cherokee to vet objects, to include a watermark on the images, and to restrict proprietary knowledge. And by restricting proprietary knowledge, what I mean is there are sacred things that the Cherokee share among themselves that are not to be shared with outsiders. And we had to restrict those from being put on the database. This project did receive a great recognition. It received the Outstanding Project Award from the Association of Tribal Archives, Libraries, and Museums. I'm just going to end and talk briefly about a contemporary project. The two that I mentioned are kind of in maintenance mode. Those were built from 2005 up until 2015. The Blue Ridge Craft Trails only began a few years ago. It is a project that is focused on contemporary craft in 25 Western North Carolina counties. And it's an economic development project that has created curated drivable craft trails to connect makers to outside markets with goals to enhance cultural tourism, increase income, and improve local economies. So that's available at blueridgecrafttrails.com. I neglected to mention that for the others, you can go in through Western Carolina University's website, but they come up if you Google Craft Revival or Cherokee Traditions. So you can see this project is sponsored by and organized by the Blue Ridge National Heritage Area. It has created a number of trails, heritage trails and music trails, and this is the craft trails. Here are those 25 counties. These are basically the mountain counties of Western North Carolina. We've divided them into smaller regions. I live here in the far west. To access the artists and galleries in that region, you would click in this little box, and it's a drop-down box, and you would select a town, and it would show you who is in that town. Another search avenue is to select a craft, and that would take you to all of say, the basket makers in this 25 county region. Just as an example of what, once you make that click, where you go, we have almost 300 artists and galleries up online already. Each has a profile page that includes photographs, descriptions. If this were an individual craft maker, it would have some history of that person, a little biography, direct contact information, which is all listed here, and a map. And if one were to click on Get Directions, it will actually make a Google map from wherever your location is to the site. And that's the end of my presentation. I look forward to talking with some of you in the breakout room.
Great, Anna, thank you so much. I also will be putting links in the chat that pertain to what everyone's talking about. So I already put a link in the chat for the Craft Revival digital archives. I will also be sharing with you a link for the Blue Ridge National Heritage Area in the chat here in a moment as well. So just kind of keep your eyes peeled for that. So if you're looking for those links as each guest presenter is talking about a specific area that they work within, I will be including those in the chat for you all. So Anna, thank you so much for introducing those to us. And Angelique, I'd like to invite you to turn your camera on, please. Great. So Angelique Vizcarrondo-Laboy is a New York and Los Angeles-based curator, writer, and arts administrator of contemporary art and craft. She serves as the assistant curator at the Museum of Arts and Design, or MAD, some of you may know it, in New York City. Vizcarrondo-Laboy also curates exhibitions independently. She is the co-creator and co-host of the podcast Clay and Color, and she holds an MA in the History of Decorative Arts, Design, and Material Culture from the Bard Graduate Center. So Angelique, welcome to our conversation.
Thank you. Thanks for the invitation. It's for those who don't know, MAD and the Craft Council have a long history, so it's always good to be able to bring both institutions together for different events and things. I'm going to get started here, put my, the Zoom menu is in the way. Okay, now this is me. I wanted to get started with actually how I got into craft. So this is me as a child in Puerto Rico. I've always been very artsy and crafty, but I guess growing up, I never really thought that it was something that I was going to pursue. I think a lot of people go through this in which your parents kind of encourage you to be a doctor or a lawyer. But so eventually my parents moved us out to Orlando, Florida, where I did high school, and I went to undergrad. I went to the University of Florida. And originally I thought I was going to be a scientist. I really liked science too. But while I was there, I realized that I did not want to work in a lab for the rest of my life. And it just kind of randomly, I ended up taking an art history class and loving it. So it went from my minor to my major when I switched. In that process, when I became an art history major, I took this class on decorative arts, which at the time I had no idea what that meant. But here are two examples of things that we talked about: an Isabella d'Este plate, a Palissy plate. They're ceramic. I got super fascinated with the material and just the idea that this one surviving object could tell so much about a group of people, a culture, or an individual. And at the same time, I was taking actual ceramics making classes, and I've never thought of myself as an artist. That's not what I am, but I really did enjoy working with the material as well. So basically, I got hooked, and I decided that I wanted to continue to sort of specialize my studies on ceramics. For grad school, I went to the Bard Graduate Center in the Upper West Side in New York. And this is a picture of me in their study room, which they have a ton of objects that you can go and sort of play with and then study them, things like that. And while I was there, originally I was focusing on European decorative arts, especially things like porcelain, for example, like Seth or Meissen. But as life would have it, eventually there were no classes available in that in my second year. And it just so happened I went to this show at the Yale Art Gallery curated by Sequoia Miller called The New Ceramic Presence in Modern Art. And this show is really important to me because I got to see basically combine the art history that I learned in undergrad, which was always just paintings, and then being able to see ceramic works in there in the same sort of storyline. And that was really important to me. And from there, I decided to switch to modern contemporary ceramics, especially American. I work with kind of everybody, but American ceramics have been my focus since then. And actually, while I was in grad school, I did an internship at the Museum of Arts and Design, MAD, and I helped in that internship to do an audit of the collection. So basically, I went object by object, stating sort of stats like demographics, what year it was collected, what year it's from, so that they could then create, the curatorial staff here at the time could create a collection strategy. And that was a very important audit. It told us a lot about the collection. The collection right now has about 3,100, a little over 3,100 objects, and the great majority of it are ceramics, or that's the largest holding of objects that we have. And I'll talk a little bit more about that in a second. So this is my role at MAD. Like I said, I started as an intern, then I was a part-time project manager, then a full-time project manager, and so on. And I've made my way up to assistant curator now in this role. Well, actually, before I get to talking about what I do specifically here, I wanted to discuss what I think the role of a curator is, which to me has three components. One is being a storyteller. I think our job as curators is not just putting putting objects out there and saying, here's some like cute things to look at. I think there's more to that. I think we need to provide context, and hopefully we're able to sort of walk an audience through why this object matters or why we're showing this work. Then being an ally of artists, especially I think in my role in terms of project management before I got to my role as assistant curator, I'm always that person who's talking to the artist. What are your needs? How can we accurately reflect what your intention was? Or when I'm writing a label, making sure that what I write is actually what the artist wants to say with their work, things like that. I also feel like I'm the person in the room that everybody's talking about different things and I'm like raising my hand, like, what about the artist? So I feel like that's a big part of being a curator. And then lastly, community building. I feel like the other two categories kind of come together to then establish that community building that we can do through programs or just through our accessibility in the way that we are conveying the story. And some objectives of how I personally like curating, I like to prioritize and amplify the voices and concerns of BIPOC artists. And that's not to say I only work with BIPOC artists, that's not true. But it's just a big thing in my personal sort of ethos. Highlighting a diversity of means of expression. And to me, that's why, craft has been marginalized for so many years. I want to put out there how important it is. I think craft is actually very versatile. For me, the definition of craft goes way beyond skill making. I think it's a methodology. I think at times it can be a feeling, it's a concept. So I'm trying to sort of underscore how important craft and craft materials and methodologies are. Then also establishing accessible and safe spaces to talk current events, develop platforms that support artists, and then also, again, create opportunities for community engagement. These are some examples of some shows that I've worked on. I've worked on over 20 shows while I've been at MAD. So I've kind of seen it all at this point, but this is an example of a solo show I worked on with Tanya Guiniga, who is an LA-based artist, mostly working in fiber, but she kind of works with all kinds of mediums. La Frontera Encounters Along the Border, which was a show that focused on jewelry in response to the issues with the US-Mexico border. Surface Depth, The Decorative After Miriam Shapiro, which was curated by our current chief curator, Elisa Author. I got to work with her on the show, and it was kind of life-changing for me. It was a very impactful show for me. We got to combine historical work, the historical work of Miriam Shapiro, with contemporary work. Maybe you'll recognize at the front, we have the work of Jeffrey Gibson, and on the far right, we have a piece by Sanford Biggers that we were able to acquire into the collection. And so part of my job, because I specialize in ceramics, is proposing acquisitions for the collection, especially focusing on ceramics. So something that we discovered in that audit is that 66% of our ceramics holding are by white men. That's probably not surprising to most people who are familiar with craft or really with the art world in general. And so when it came time for me to come up with a collecting strategy, I decided to focus solely on artists of color, on women and members of the LGBTQ community. So these are two examples of recent acquisitions I've been able to usher into the collection. But I think it's very important to also bring young voices into the collection. A lot of the work that we have is from sort of early on in our establishment. So things from like the 50s and 60s, which is when sort of MAD started. And then one project that I've worked on since the beginning, since it started at MAD, is the Burke Prize, which was established in 2018 and is still ongoing. And you may ask, what is it? It's a $50,000 unrestricted award given to one artist working in one of the craft mediums. So our sort of 5 mediums that we specialize at the museum are clay, fiber, glass, wood, and metals, particularly jewelry. So an artist that works in one of those mediums gets selected by a jury to be the winner of this award that we hope will do a lot for them. So really the question is, why does it matter? And to me, it's because of people like this. So these are the 3 winners we've had so far: Shanupa Hanska-Luger, Indira Allegra, and Charisse Perlina Weston, who's our most recent winner. It wasn't on purpose, but I absolutely am thrilled that all the winners have been artists of color, which I think really sends a message about normalizing supporting artists of color who most of the time have a harder time because of systemic racism and the way sort of the systems are set up. But these awards have been able to do a lot for them, whether it is because they want to donate it back to their communities, whether they need it for medical bills, or because it's going to help them focus on their career instead of having to have a job on the side. These kinds of awards can be, I feel, life-changing and life-saving. So I wish there were more. This is an example from the first year, of some images from the first year. We put on an exhibition of all the finalists' work, because even though we're only able to give one award, we want to sort of show everybody how exciting the contemporary craft field is. So I'll just go through some images here. That one that I just passed was Shanupa's work. We have Roberto Lugo at the front, Jordan Nazar at the back. We have Heidi Lau on the left, Ibrahim Said at the front, which I think he's actually in North Carolina, very close to Anna and Gwen. And this is Willem O'Brien. This is the second year, but we have Bojana Guin at the front, Amber Cohen on the left, Salvador Jimenez Flores in the center, and then Linda Lopez to the back right? And then to the right is Bisa Butler, who, by the way, I don't know if you know her work, that's not a painting, that's a quilt. I want to note it. And this is the work of Sarah Zapata. Like many of us, we had to sort of pivot when pandemic life happened, and it was just much harder to go physically anywhere. So the 2021 Burke Prize is a digital prize. You can go see the finalist work digitally. And so I think Gwen is putting the link on the chat so you can go explore by yourself. This is just a screenshot of the main page. It was very challenging. It's very challenging to do craft digitally, I'll say. It was definitely a different way of curating for me. But one of the exciting things I think that we managed to do was do some 3D modeling of some works. And if you go on the website, this is a piece by Nikki Green. You can go and kind of go all around the piece. You can actually see parts of the piece that you would not even be able to see in person, like the bottom of the piece. And also really seeing that inside, because when you think about it, when you're in a museum, there's always stanchions, or you need to stay kind of far back from the artwork. So you actually get to see really well what's on the inside of this piece. And here's some pictures from the second year from like the whole group and some programs that we got to have. It's really awesome to create sort of a community of people through these cohorts. I've built amazing relationships with these artists, and I'm really grateful and honored to have the opportunity to do this. And also, where are they now? They've honestly gone on to do incredible things. Somebody like Bisa Butler, who was the finalist in 2019. She's had this solo show, travel all over the country, gotten so much press over it. Roberto Lugo, who was a finalist of the first year, had this really great commission from the Brooklyn Museum. And sort of the list of the things they've gone on to do it's endless. They just done it all. And I'm really proud of them. And again, so grateful that I got to be a little part of their journey. And then, so I do independent work as well. And I just wanted to highlight Sleight of Hand, which is a show that I did during my curatorial fellowship at the Center for Craft in Asheville. We have a very good relationship with the Center for Craft as well. And while I was doing this show, it was in the thick of the pandemic, so there were a lot of changes. And eventually, because ceramics are really hard to ship, that it's a bane of my existence, it's very expensive, I decided to do sort of a smaller version of the original idea I had. And what that ended up being was a show that focused on 6 ceramic artists contemporary artists that focus on ceramic. They're all artists of color, and they use humor in their practice to talk about some serious issues such as race, gender, immigration status, and things like that. And this has been like a really huge research project for me. It's an ongoing research project that I hope to turn into a bigger show someday, but I was really grateful to have the opportunity to put this show together and have it live, even though times were hard. So here's some more examples. This is Diana Desenia Alvarado. This is Mariam Youssef, who's actually a Burke Prize finalist this year. This is Woody Diothello, Yvette Mayorga. And then, like Gwen mentioned, I have a podcast. It's called Clay and Color. I co-created it and co-hosted it with Alex Anderson, who is also involved in ceramics. He's a ceramic artist. And this show also focuses on young artists of color who work primarily with ceramics. I never thought I would have a podcast. It's something I never wanted to do necessarily. But like I said, I like creating platforms for artists. And so when this opportunity came along, I decided to go for it just because it would be one more place where they could put their voice out there and people could have access to them. And I think that's it. I'm done.
That's great, Angelique. Thank you so much. And thank you for all that you do to bring artists of color visibility. I really love that. That's a big part of kind of what's important to you. So, and all the work that you've done around that. And I got an opportunity to see the Center for Craft exhibition, and it was quite lovely. So it was a treat at a time of pandemic when nobody was going out and seeing people. So thank you for that.
Thank you.
Gwen,
Yeah.
could you please turn your camera on?
Oh, sure. Absolutely. Sorry. There we go. Now you get to see me again. Sorry about that. Great. I would like to invite Beth Goodrich to turn her camera on, please. All right. Hi, Beth. Welcome. So Beth Goodrich joined the American Craft Council as the librarian in 2017. She manages the library, archives, and digital collections for the organization and provides research and reference support for both ACC staff, members, and the public. Beth received her BA in Theater Arts and Communications from Kalamazoo College in Michigan, and her MLIS with a concentration in information organization from the University of Wisconsin-Milwaukee. She has worked in a number of repositories in the Twin Cities, including the Hennepin County Library, the Minnesota Digital Library at Minitex, and the American Swedish Institute. Prior to entering the library field, Beth was a dressmaker and designer of bridal and evening gowns. Outside of the library, she enjoys reading, sewing, and experimenting in the kitchen with the bounty of the garden. So Beth, welcome, and thank you for being here.
Thank you so much, Gwen. I want to thank all the attendees here for joining us in this Future Insights talk. I'm delighted to be here. I am coming to you from the American Craft Council offices, which are located on the lands which in the Dakota language are called Minnesota Bakoche, which means land where the water reflects the sky. The ACC library is located here within our offices, and it dates back to 1956, which was when the library was given a formalized space within the Museum of Contemporary Crafts in New York City, which later became the American Craft Museum, and today is still active as the Museum of Arts and Design. The collection in its entirety was moved to Minneapolis with the ACC offices, thanks in large part to a number of people who were very adamant that this collection needed to remain together, intact, and were able to steward the collection in full to the Minneapolis area. As Gwen mentioned, I have been the librarian with the ACC since 2017, and I'm going to share my screen right now and give everyone a little bit of a tour of our library and the collections that we hold. So here on our website, you can access all kinds of our resources from anywhere. And I will give you a little bit of a description about our collections, which I think of as being kind of three distinct collecting groups. And as a solo librarian, I manage all aspects of the library. First, we do have a print collection, which contains over 20,000 volumes of books, exhibition catalogs, bound volumes of back issues of periodicals, newsletters. And here we have, you can access our library catalog and search all the items that we have within our catalog. Alongside our print collection, we also have a collection of artist files, nearly 4,000 artist files that are focused on craft artists, artists generally who have had some kind of a relationship with the ACC over the years. Either they were included in exhibitions at the Museum of Contemporary Crafts, they were featured in our magazine, either Craft Horizons or American Craft Magazine, or had some other relationship with the ACC. And all of those artist files are included in our catalog. So for example, if you were to search on an artist's name in our catalog, along with all the other resources about that particular artist, you will also see here that we have an artist file for that particular artist. And within the record, you can see a brief description of what kinds of materials are held within that artist file. Typically, those files will contain resumes, postcards, correspondence, exhibition catalogs, press clippings, all kinds of ephemeral materials that kind of document the activities of the artist. The second distinct collection that we have is our archives. And we have 4 major archives, archive collections within our library. You can also access descriptions of what we hold within those archives on our website. The 4 major collections that we have are the Institutional Archives of the American Craft Council. We have the archives of the Museum of Contemporary Crafts and the American Craft Museum up until 1990. In 1990, that is the year that the museum split off from the Craft Council and became an independent organization, but we still hold the archives for the museum up until 1990. We also have the archives for the World Crafts Council and the Craft Students League of New York, which was an organization for craft students that was active from the 20s up until about 2005. Here on this page, you can see these links. If you click on these links, you can go into a page that has a deeper description of the series of collections within that major collection. So this is the description page, the landing page for the American Craft Council archives, and you'll see all the different series that we have. And you can also click these links and we'll take you again to a deeper description of that particular series. This is a description of the series for America House, which was a retail shop that the council operated from 1941 until 1972, I believe. And then if you scroll down, you can see actually a folder by folder listing of the items that we have within that collection. I wanted to also show the landing page for the Museum of Contemporary Crafts. And here you'll see a chronological listing of all of the exhibitions that were held at the museum up until 1990. And again, you can click these links and it will take you into deeper descriptions of what is held within that particular collection for that exhibition. The third distinct collection that we have is our digital collections. We have a very robust digital collection that is accessible from our website as well. And these materials are primarily materials that have been digitized from the archives of the American Craft Council or from the Museum of Contemporary Crafts. So these will be exhibitions, conference materials or images from our craft fairs, as well as full scans of every issue of Craft Horizons magazine and American Craft magazine from 1941 up until 1990. And we have a few other smaller collections from outside organizations. Here you can see the Minnesota Crafts Council. This is their collection of newsletters. We have some materials from the Society of North American Goldsmiths, oral histories from the Furniture Society, and materials from the Friends of Fiber Art International, which was an organization for fiber arts collectors. And those materials were all provided to us, had been digitized by those organizations and then provided to us to share on our platform. One final aspect of what we show on our website regarding the library is that may be of interest to some people, is to see our collection development policy, which talks about what the library's mission is, what our purpose and mission is, the scope of the collection, the types of materials that we're interested in and are looking to collect, guidelines for our collecting, subject areas, and types of materials. And this might be useful to anyone who's considering making donations of materials to the library, or anyone who just wants a little bit of a deeper understanding of what it is that we do and what we collect within our library space. And if anyone has any questions about our collection, feel free to contact me. I would also like to say that we are considered a public library. You don't have to be a member of our organization to use our resources. I'm assisting people from all walks of life, all types of interests, from all over the world. And you can reach me by phone, email, chat, or come into our space if you are in the Twin Cities area, and make an appointment to use our resources on site. And if you come here to our About the Library and Visiting page, you can find links to our hours and means to connect directly with me. I am here 5 days a week, and I'm happy to answer any questions that you might have.
Great, Beth. Thank you so much for sharing all that. It's been in the space. It's great. It's easy to get lost in the space for hours or days at a time. And I know that you've done a lot of work to organize and find some of those extra goodies that have gotten packed in boxes and not discovered or seen before. So thank you for introducing all those aspects of what's available through the Craft Council. I did also put Beth's email in the chat so that if you do want to reach out to her, you're welcome to do that. And if you happen to be in the Minneapolis area, she would love to welcome you into the archive. So take time to go in and spend some time in there. So great. Thank you so much, Beth. All right, great. I'd like to invite Dr. Tiffany Momin to also bring her camera on, please. Great. So Dr. Tiffany Momin is a public historian and assistant professor at Sewanee, the University of the South, with years of experience participating in preserving community histories. Her work has taken her throughout the Southeast, organizing community-based historic preservation projects. Tiffany is the founder and co-director of the Black Craftspeople Digital Archives, blackcraftspeople.org. I'll put the link here in the chat in just a moment. It's a Black digital humanities project that centers Black craftspeople, their lives, and their contributions to the making and building of America. Throughout her career, Tiffany has lectured on the subject of Black craftspeople at organizations such as the Colonial Williamsburg Foundation, the Museum of Early Southern Decorative Arts, the Winterthur Museum and Gardens, and the Daughters of the American Revolution Museum, and others. So Tiffany, welcome today to our conversation.
Thank you. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. And I just want to say good afternoon, everyone. And today I'm going to give you a brief overview of the Black Craftspeople Digital Archive, a digital humanities website that I founded in 2019 and that I co-direct with my colleague, Dr. Torin Gadsden, a history professor at the University of North Carolina, Greensboro. So the Black Craftspeople Digital Archive seeks to enhance what we know about Black craftspeople by telling both a spatial story and a historically informed story that highlights the lives of Black craftspeople and the objects they created through the creation of a digital archive and a digital map. Screenshots of both are pictured here on screen. We aggregate data from Black craftspeople from their arrival in this country through 1900. And currently the archive is home to 960 Black craftspeople, both free and enslaved, involved in 45 trades from wheelwrights and tanners to cabinet makers, goldsmiths, dressmakers, carpenters, blacksmiths, and more, located in the 18th century South Carolina Lowcountry and 19th century Tennessee. And so I approached this research specifically through the decorative arts. What I found was that I was never satisfied with the way that decorative arts museums and decorative arts historic sites interpreted Black craftspeople. And so this project makes an intervention into that world by asking new questions, presenting new evidence, and arguing and exclaiming that Black craftspeople are just as important to the story of the making of this country as any other craftsperson behind the objects that we've grown to love in our country's museums. And I apologize if it's a bit noisy here. It's the last day of class, and so students are a bit rowdy. And it was the summer of 2018 that completely changed the trajectory of my research when I found the inspiration for the Black Craftspeople Digital Archive. I decided that I would move away from the traditional decorative arts approach of doing research and take a more humanistic approach. And that summer, I spent that summer researching a Black carpenter and house joiner named John Quash Williams, who lived in 18th century Charleston, South Carolina. And my approach was to move beyond the object he created and really examine his life. I often tell people that Williams changed my life. And I tell this story often, primarily, like I said, because he was the impetus for the Black Craftspeople Digital Archive. But beyond that, his story is such a good story because it touches on so many aspects of what it meant to be Black in this country in the colonial period. John Williams is notable for so many reasons that I've begun to call him the divine craftsman in the Holy City, and the Holy City, of course, being a nickname for Charleston. So while enslaved, he dodged death at the hands of the South Carolina slave courts, which had accused him of attempting to incite an insurrection and flee to Spanish Florida. While enslaved, he also labored to create wooden indigo vats that aided well-known botanist and enslaver Eliza Lucas Pinckney in her successful cultivation of indigo. He was baptized into the Anglican Church, where his name was changed from Quash to John Williams. He learned to read and write and possibly attended the Reverend Alexander Garden School for Enslaved Individuals. He did all of this while living away from his enslaver's home, in a home with his rent paid by his enslaver, Charles Pinckney. He married and had 4 children. In May of 1750, when Charles Pinckney freed him from bondage, he advertised in the South Carolina Gazette for work. And you can see that advertisement, a copy of that advertisement there on the bottom of the screen. He was given land by Charles Pinckney near the present day location of the Charleston City Market to build a home for himself. And he also received a royal land grant from South Carolina Royal Governor William Henry Lyttelton for 600 acres on the Santee River. So it is truly a remarkable story. And the image of the house there is the Pinckney Mansion, the home that John Williams led the carpentry, woodwork, and joinery on from 1746 to about 1750. And so our approach at the BCDA is to take these 3 avenues. And first, we begin by examining sources. And these can be anything from newspaper articles to census records to wills and estate records. We comb through them looking for details and names, and we record all of that info. I tell my students all the time that I spend so much time reading 18th century newspapers out of South Carolina, just looking for information that we can add to the digital archive. And so our second approach here is to examine objects. And the purpose here is to take objects, existing objects, and research them to find out more about their creation. When we examine objects, we step away from that traditional art history approach and we center the crafts person. And our third avenue is place. And when I say place, I am thinking beyond just latitude and longitude points. I am thinking about the presence of people. And so, of course, all of being successful at these 3 avenues here all rest upon understanding the context of Black life in this country. And so once we've completed the research process, we then add the craftsperson to the digital archive and digital map, creating what you see on screen here. And so right now we are looking at Charleston, South Carolina, and all of its landmarks. But I am most interested in that little blue dot at the center of the screen, in the middle of the yellow square there. And so if you were on our digital map, you would click that dot and it would immediately bring you to the story of Joe, an enslaved jeweler held in bondage by well-known Charleston jeweler John Paul Grimke. And so here we've connected Joe to the location of Grimke's home and shop in 1771 through the map. We've linked him to his record in the digital archive, which you can see on the right side of the screen there, thus connecting that primary source to place. And I've also included an image of a brooch here held in the collections of the Charleston Museum and attributed to John Paul Grimke's shop. We know that Grimke enslaved a host of men, trained them to be jewelers, and used their labor in his shop, thus complicating the narrative that Grimke worked alone. And so our hope here is to find more stories such as these and encourage museums and historic sites to change their narratives and fix their broken object interpretations. And so one of the questions that we are often asked is if we will go beyond South Carolina and Tennessee. And the answer is yes. And here are some of our target areas where research is ongoing. One of the things that I always mention about this project is that we do not like to work alone. We love to collaborate with scholars, with genealogists, with museums, museum and historic site employees. And so if you know of any Black craftspeople in these regions, any good stories that you would like to share, please do let us know. We will add that information to the archive and attribute that work to you. Last March, we launched a Tennessee collection, and we are working very hard behind the scenes to finish our collection that's in Jamaica. I finally feel safe to say that it is coming. It's in its final stages. We also have worked with interns that were interning at the Chipstone Foundation to help us complete a New York archive, sort of taking us out of the US South here. And so we are currently hard at work with our People and Places initiative. And really this project came about because I was interested in doing more than just having the archival entries and the map. I really wanted to tell more stories here. And so People and Places will launch soon. We have been working hard behind the scenes to make it good. We were really interested in making it what it needs to be. And so our website will feature short biographies of Black makers, and we will take some of the stories that we featured on our Instagram account, as well as new stories and tell stories of little known makers. And you will get to hear about people like the McCadden brothers of Covington, Tennessee, and the buildings and homes they built for Covington's Black community. And you can see one of the buildings there on screen is the Canaan Missionary Baptist Church there in Covington. And it's a fine example and one of the only extant properties still standing associated with the McCadden brothers. And you'll get to read the stories of the Parkey family of East Tennessee, a family of enslaved and later free blacksmiths. And that's a photo of their blacksmith's shop that's still extant there on the right side of the screen. It's been moved from its current location to a new one. We were also working with a student out of Warren Wilson College who completed research on the glass makers that you see pictured there on screen. And so we are just, gearing up and ready to share these stories. And so when conditions allow, we hope to visit more sites associated with Black craftspeople, engage more communities, and speak to more museum groups. Like I mentioned, I tell people all the time that through this process, we have found no new objects. No one has come up to us with a new object associated with a Black craftsperson during our target time period. But what we've done is we've worked hard to ask more questions and tell new stories of objects in museums across the South. And so you can find out more information about us at blackcraftspeople.org. If you are on Instagram, you can follow us at Black Craftspeople DA. We share stories 4 days a week to about 19,000 people. And you can see the picture on the right. That's me standing outside of a Tennessee State historical marker for William Edmondson about a year ago now. taking part in our sign campaign to show people that essentially Black craftspeople worked and lived everywhere across the Southern landscape, and to encourage people to tell these stories. Thank you so much.
That's great. Thanks, Tiffany. I think bringing visibility to those who helped build America is really important, and you're doing that with your digital archive. So I think the work you're doing is very important to kind of tell those stories that have not been traditionally told in the past. So thank you for that. Great. All right. Next, I'd like to invite Jamie Ann to please turn her camera on.
Hey, Gwen.
Hey, Jamie Ann. Jamie Ann Jacobin is the executive director of the James Renwick Alliance, which is a national nonprofit organization dedicated to fostering public appreciation, education, and connoisseurship of American craft. Jamie Ann has made it her personal mission to increase awareness about collecting craft as a source of support for artists and for preserving the history of the field. Formerly, she was the executive officer for the Creative Crafts Council, the executive director of the Shenandoah Arts Council, and owner of the Great Gallery. Jamie Ann received a BFA from Finlandia University in ceramics and an MFA in curatorial practice from the Maryland Institute College of Art. So Jamie Ann, welcome to today's conversation. Thanks for being here.
Thank you so much, Gwen, and thanks to the American Craft Council. I think it's been so wonderful to hear everyone's kind of presentation and perspectives about stewardship and legacy. And I think we've kind of covered documenting and archiving, even education and collecting. And I think that's mostly what I'll be focusing on. So I'm going to be sharing both, I would say, some information about the James Renwick Alliance for Craft, and then I'm going to be sharing inspiration for what I can, I don't know, maybe see the future of collecting craft being. So as Gwen mentioned, my name is Jamie Ann, and the James Renwick Alliance for Craft is a membership-based organization founded in 1982, based out of Washington, D.C. We are dedicated to fostering appreciation, education, and connoisseurship, and we really focus on those three different items in everything that we do. We fulfill this mission through programs, educational trips, publications, and recognition of excellence. So, in our programming, we have hosted about 4 to 6 trips a year, which has totaled over 100 trips since 1984. So these are educational opportunities for people to learn about artists and to learn about the unique arts industry in different places around the United States, but also around the world. We also host 17 to 25 events annually, including artist conversations, demonstrations, museum visits, private collection tours, and other educational opportunities. Our recognition of excellence includes the ACC Baltimore Awards. So during the show, I thought I should mention this since ACC is our wonderful host today. We usually select one artist out of this show to honor, recognize, and give a small contribution to. Additionally, we have a $5,000 unrestricted Chrysalis Award for emerging artists, which happens once a year. We have our Distinguished Artist Series, which is a program that happens 4 times a year and has featured almost 150 artists in total. And actually, because we're talking about legacy, I'm very proud to say that we recently received a grant for support to record and archive these weekends so that they are more accessible to artists, scholars, and the like. So that was some good news that I'm happy to share today. Lastly, I would like to share our the Spring Craft Weekend, which we do annually. And we alternate between awards for our Masters in the Medium and our Distinguished Educators. So these are our most coveted awards that have been given to 60 Masters in the Medium and just under 40 Distinguished Educators. Most recently, we honored Wendy Mariyama, Consuelo Underwood, David Harper Clemens, Sergei Isipov, and Preston Singletary. The photo here is actually the last awards that we did in person before COVID. So all of these efforts afford our artist a certain notion of notoriety that supports their artistic legacy. And speaking of artistic legacy, I would be remiss if we didn't talk about the support that the James Vermick Alliance for Craft gives to the Renwick Gallery. So we have provided almost $4 million in support to the Renwick Gallery, and we've supported the purchase of almost 200 objects for their permanent collection. Our most recent acquisitions have been purchased in honor of our 40th anniversary and their 50th anniversary, which we'll be celebrating May 12th to 15th. So hopefully everybody can travel, and it'll be a wonderful time to be in Washington, D.C. to celebrate American craft. This is the first piece that we purchased as part of this dedicated acquisition campaign. This is Juicy by Roberto Lugo. Other acquisitions have included Safe Journey by Preston Singletary, who I mentioned was a 2021 Master of the Medium, and Drag Piece by Susie Ganch, along with several others. So as one of the only national craft organizations dedicated to both public collecting, but also private collecting, the work that I do at the Alliance has intrigued me to better understand our members and friends and the role that they've played in the history of American craft. Many have spent a lifetime, and I really mean a lifetime, collecting craft and they've been able to amass a significant collection, which has benefited countless museums in the entire craft field. So this is a chart that's been produced by Artsy. Artsy is a wonderful platform for purchasing work. This chart was done in 2019. Now, I'm going to say that if I were to do this chart, or hopefully, I would imagine, if I were to do the research for this chart, I would see this here. I don't know if you can see my mouse. This bar, which is a support to artists, increased significantly. I've yet to meet one collector in the craft field whose main motivator is not supporting the artists that they meet. So the question I consistently ask myself is, how do we inspire new generations of collectors and better encourage inclusion in all collections as a method of stewardship and legacy? First and foremost, organizations like ours, curators, writers, and others who have traditionally been considered gatekeepers, have the opportunity to take responsibility in this change. As someone who believes in not just asking questions, but implementing solutions, I think there are a few ways, some of which I have had the privilege to pursue, and other efforts that serve as a source of inspiration. So I'm going to go over some of these bits of inspiration and a few things that we've already been implementing. This picture, though, is an example of maybe what you would think of as typical collectors, but Gambriel Wills, who's pictured in the center, and he always covers his face, it's his thing. He has started a group of young collectors, many of color, called League OTO, who are changing the paradigm and popularizing collecting as a form of personal identity and expression. So ultimately, the solution to making collecting more inclusive is not just about taking responsibility, but also demystifying and democratizing collecting. So what does that mean? Well, first and foremost, I think we need to redefine collecting. I think this is a huge problem. I always define an art collector as someone who prioritizes buying art regardless of their financial position. So Philly Stewarts, this is a really interesting organization, or forward-thinking organization dedicated out of, or based out of Philadelphia. And they're dedicated to encouraging collectors to buy Philadelphia-based artists. They recommend spending between 3 and 5% of your overall income. I'm not sure if I abide by a certain percentage, but I think the concept is the same, that everyone and anyone can be a collector. Along the lines of demystifying, the process of buying art and building a collection needs to be more transparent. Social media and the internet, obviously, have completely changed our accessibility to find artists. However, I think that there are still a number of emerging collectors that do not know that you can often pay for artwork in monthly increments, or that there are other affordable acquisition options for museums. So I think that there's a lot of opportunity there. Of course, I am encouraged when I find a lot of new young collectors sharing their collections on Instagram and making that a more popular thing for younger generations. To implement this change, I often speak about collecting with other groups or organizations. I interview other young collectors, and at the Alliance, we host programs about topics related to collecting. The idea of democratizing collecting encourages innovative ideas. Not only do we need to inspire young collectors and collectors of color, but we can open up an opportunity to think about alternative methods of collecting. For example, I think there's a lot of opportunity for crowdsourced purchases. When you think about it, the Alliance has been crowdfunding acquisitions for the Renwick Gallery for decades. But what if we opened it to other institutions or organizations? Or what if other organizations led crowdsourced acquisitions? I think that there's a lot of opportunity in this, and I even think it could trickle down to just like-minded individuals who'd all like to pitch in to see a piece in a museum. A great crowdsourced example is the image here on the screen. This is a purchase of Madam C.J. Walker by Sonia Clark for the Blanton Museum of Art in Austin, Texas. A docent and local Black businesswoman, Marilyn Johnson, led an initiative to purchase this piece of art to ensure representation in the museum. She raised the funds with the help of the museum by reaching out to other Black business owners in the community and ultimately secured over 50 private donations to purchase the piece. So in a way, the art that we find in institutions is a reflection of power. And buying craft can be an act of agency. Placing it in a prominent museum can be an intervention. At the height of craft collecting in the 80s and 90s, collectors purchased work and in so doing ensured a future for American craft in art history. I think that this should not be forgotten or taken lightly. Today, we can continue their efforts and change the discourse by purchasing work to inspire equitable collections that reflect the future legacy that we want to see and we want to leave for future generations. I'm proud to say that of the pieces that the Alliance has helped secure for the Renwick Gallery, 70% have been by artists of color. Our anniversary campaign is over, but we can all work towards this effort. And so I leave you with this hopeful protest banner made by Aram Han Cifuentes, which is another recent acquisition to the Renwick Gallery, and look forward to hearing other potential ideas, solutions, and ways we can further change the craft field together.
Great. Thank you, Jamie Ann. That was wonderful. And I think it's important for us to remind ourselves that part of stewardship and legacy has everything to do with collecting as much as archiving and documenting. So thank you for bringing that perspective to the conversation. I'd like to invite all the presenters to please turn their screens on. Let's get to So we're going to spend a few moments just kind of engaging in a group conversation, and then we will be moving into those breakout rooms. But I'd love to ask each of you, really, what does stewardship and legacy mean to you? You've each kind of dedicated your career to this in some way, but I'd really love to kind of get how you define it yourself. And in the meantime, I'm going to figure out what to do with the sunshine. Sorry about that, y'all. I can't help the sunny day in Asheville, so I apologize for that. So I would love to hear what does stewardship and legacy mean to each of you? Does anybody want to go first?
I can just quickly say I think that stewardship is about caring and the responsibility of kind of maintaining things for the future. And then I would say legacy is the result of that.
Great. Anybody else want to weigh in?
I guess for me, it's just the idea of when you leave somewhere, you want to leave it better than you found it. So that's really just the gist of everything that I'm doing. I know I'm not, anything that I'm doing is not going to necessarily change the world, but maybe a lot of actions from different people together can help. So that's it.
That's great.
When I think about legacy, I often think about how the Black craftspeople in our digital archive are living their lives under oppression, but still going on to create beautiful things in a world that sought to have them do the complete opposite. And so in stewarding that legacy, I always feel like I discussed how I grew so upset with the decorative arts. I sort of felt like it's my duty as someone who likes this type of work, who appreciates this type of work, to recognize them and everything that they contributed.
That's great.
When I first began my work, as most of you see, I went to school when my art history classes didn't not only include no people of color, but no women at all. And so that was an opportunity for me when the National Museum of Women in the Arts hosted that first conference. It really changed the trajectory of my work in terms of really digging deep into broadening what was considered art history to include makers of craft and include other people beside the revered geniuses. And I think that's what's incredibly important of all the work that's being done here.
Yeah, that's great.
I think in terms of the work that I do, I look at stewardship as kind of bringing forward and calling attention to certain collections, and being a good steward means really being an advocate for those resources and those collections. Legacy, I look at as being the story of an artist, the story of a community. But along with that story, it also has to do with how it's preserved and carried forward into the future. And tied to that is also how is that story being told, and who is doing the telling of that story.
Yeah, that's great. So after, now that you've each kind of defined or talked about kind of really what stewardship and legacy means to you, how can we steward more diverse artists and collectors in the field? Each of you are kind of doing your own thing, but do you have any other ideas or thoughts of ways that we can continue to help support those efforts?
I want to say, sorry, I was going to say, I want to say something, but there's like some chairs being moved and I'm sorry for the noise. I think it's not only about trying to get sort of people through the door, but there has to be people inside that are ready, can have a connection with that diverse, whatever diverse group it is that you're trying to make a connection with. There has to be that connection. They have to be able to, in a sense, see themselves in the space before you kind of can get them through the space. So I think that's a big thing that institutions have to think about in terms of like, who is the person sort of doing the outreach to get collectors, to get artists, to get the audience or community to come in. It's both, it has to be on both sides.
Good point. Any other thoughts?
I think it's about trying new things too, right? I had someone say to me during the pandemic, well, you just got to throw it against a wall and see if it sticks. And I thought, what a funny thing to say. But actually, when there's so many new opportunities and things are changing so quickly, I mean, you have to try new things. I know we're trying we beta test things sort of at the Alliance. We say, okay, we're going to invite a young artist to this and see if it's fruitful. Or we're inviting a group of a local tech company to an opportunity to buy craft. Is that something that's going to work? to support artists? I don't know. And I don't, I think we don't know the answers, but trying it sure is a first step.
Well, and Damiana, go back to your presentation also around kind of how do we cultivate more diverse younger collectors, right, in the field, which I thought was really interesting to think about the crowdsourcing idea, which I think is really a kind of fascinating thought. So I definitely want to explore that idea some more with you kind of outside of today's talk, because I think that the aging of the collector and how do we cultivate younger people to appreciate the handmade and want to collect is really been a conversation that, I've been part of for at least 10 years. And we haven't quite seen that solution come to fruition yet and bubble up. But I think that you're at the tip of some really interesting thoughts around that. Anybody else want to comment or have some thoughts around that?
Sure, I have
Yeah, go
oh,
ahead.
I have a couple of thoughts. I think for those of us who are in a position to manage collections, I think there are several things we need to do. First of all, I think we need to pay attention to who are the artists out there who are up and coming, who are speaking with a loud voice, with a different voice, and it takes work. It takes work. You can't just sit back and wait for things to come to you. You have to do the work to find out what is out there and who is out there and who has a voice that needs to be shared. I think we also need to be curious. We need to find out what it is that we don't know. Don't rest on our laurels and just our current knowledge, but be curious about the art world, the craft world out there, the world of information resources. And finally, I think we need to be generous. We need to not continue to share the same old stories over and over again. Find new stories, find new voices to amplify.
Yeah, those are great. Anna.
Yes, one thing that I have seen, and I think it's critical to any research work, is to be able to share that with the community when you're finished. I've seen too often, and sometimes from some very prestigious museums may do a project, especially with a marginalized community, and the efforts of that project serve the museum well, but there is not anything that is actually benefiting the subject, so to speak. And I think that's always important to make sure that the people that you're working with receive the benefit of the research.
Mm-hmm. That's a good point. And I think you and Tiffany kind of illustrate that, where you have gone into this really focused research and then you've brought it to visibility by creating your digital platforms around that so that people can access the work that you've all done. But more and more people being able to create the accessibility would be wonderful.
I also wonder if there's opportunity for more collaboration, because in an organization like mine, where we're mostly dedicated to education and programming, or we're doing mostly education and programming, our opportunity for research or even our resources for research is limited. Could we partner with people who are already doing that research, and then instead our portion of that effort would be presenting it to the public in innovative ways? I think that might be an opportunity.
That's a great point, because I've been at 3 state universities, and I've seen so many great research projects that benefit the professor and certainly benefit the students, but it doesn't go beyond that. And to be able to collaborate to make that research accessible would be a great step forward.
Yeah,
and I would add to all of these answers, just asking, but listening, and like heavy emphasis on the listening part. Listening to how you may be able to amplify their work, if they even want you to amplify their work, but really listening to what they need from you, and thinking about how you can help them get to that next step.
Very good point. What are some like innovative ways individuals can document and archive artists or maybe even their own work? I know that one of the things that has come up a lot in these conversations I've had with different presenters for the different calls is that the biggest challenge around documentation and archiving is the fact that artists often don't do that for themselves. Angelique's nodding. As a curator, I'm sure you've run into some of those challenges, Angelique.
Yeah, I mean, I'm friends with young artists, and I try to be like, yeah, you should probably keep like, I don't know, a binder or a folder in your some type of document, you know, in which you are documenting these things, just as simple as like, here's a picture of the thing, title, year, DIMS, materials. Where did it go? Do you have it? Did you sell it to someone? What shows it's been on? I mean, that's the ideal world in which somebody is doing that kind of record keeping. Most often we don't find that, either for X or Y reason, because they literally couldn't keep the record, or because they weren't good at keeping the record, or they just didn't even think about it. But I think it's the hope that we, maybe curators or other people who are working with artists, that you can like sort of encourage that and just it honestly, I think it benefits the artist in the end to be able to have that kind of record keeping. But some people still won't do it just because that you're just not into it. I don't know. But yeah, it's great when those exist, but also fun when they don't, and you just go into very intensive research trips, maybe to the library at the ACC.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
And I have encouraged, you know, when I've had any discussions like this with an artist, I have encouraged them and perhaps begun the discussion by asking, who do you want to trust your legacy to? Do you want to trust that your friends and family are going to carry on that work forward, or some stranger? Do you want to leave it to some stranger to take care of that? And if not, if you want to have some control over your legacy, then please do some documenting. You know, whether you know, any little bit is better than nothing.
That's so smart.
Yes, and please don't trust that you can store photos or images of all of your works in Facebook or Instagram and trust that it's going to be preserved. Please don't. Please back it up 2-3 times.
Have your own external drive backup.
Yes.
Right. We've seen that where people wake up one day and their whole Instagram account is completely wiped out. And as we all know, the Meta platform, social media platforms do not have customer services, you know, numbers you can call. So it's really challenging and difficult. Most people just have to start over. So I think that's really great advice, Beth. So thanks. Anybody else have
Does
some
everyone
thought?
know the artist?
Go ahead. Yeah, go ahead, Jamie. I know what you're about to talk about, so go for it.
Well, I think Tiffany was about to say something. Go ahead, Tiffany. Sorry.
Oh, I was just going to say that as a public historian, I often find myself doing sort of these oral history workshops for like community histories, but I always have this sort of program in the back of my head where it is in that same vein of showing, of doing those oral history type workshops. It shows crafts people how to archive their information, what types of materials to store their records in, and things like that. Just to ensure that, you know, that knowledge, that know-how gets out there so that these things can be saved.
I think along the lines of the oral histories, and of course I'm seeing Mary Savick in the chat. I think the American Art Archives, Nanette Laitman Oral Histories is an amazing resource. I mean, even some of our early members of the Alliance, I could listen to their oral histories and by the end know their favorite cake, along with important, you know, bits of information about American craft. But also, I'm not sure if you're all familiar with the Artist Legacy Project, which is responsible for the Viola Frey archives. I think that's a really innovative project where kind of, Beth, what you were saying, you know, there was a few artists and they said, well, I don't want my legacy to be up to whomever. And so we're going to form an organization, get together, and we're going to make sure that we're responsible for one another. So I think that's kind of an innovative project that I was kind of unaware of, that maybe method of thinking until the last maybe 5 years.
Yeah, that's great. All right, well, this discussion has been great, and I know we could go on, but I do want to go ahead and move into the breakout rooms. Just some information, breakout rooms are assigned randomly. Each presenter will lead the conversation inside the breakout room. We do have some specific questions set aside for that room, but it is also an informal conversation. So if something else or other themes come up, you're welcome to have those conversations. We do have note takers in each of the rooms that will be just capturing kind of some of the main ideas explored and discussed in the room. I will give you a 5-minute warning as well as a 2-minute warning broadcast into the room for each of the participants. So you know the countdown will be in there for about 20 minutes. If you are not interested in moving into a breakout room, you do not have to do so. So all you need to do is just not accept the invitation as it comes up. So just a little piece of information like about that, you can just hang out with Jason and I here until those breakout rooms finish up, and we'll reconvene and conclude our conversation at the end. We'll probably end up finishing up about right at 4, maybe a little bit after if you're in Eastern time, or 3 if you're in Central, or 2 in Mountain, and 1 in Pacific time. So we are running about 5 minutes behind. So I'm very excited to go ahead and open up those rooms. If you have any trouble unmuting yourself or taking yourself off camera, sometimes that happens because you might have an older version of Zoom or an older computer. You can reach out to us and we will try to help you, but often we cannot do much about that because it's about your personal computer versus the tech side of Zoom. So just a piece of information on that. So again, I'm going to go ahead and open the rooms. You should have invite. There's a few of you that joined late, so just give me a moment to put you into assigned rooms. Welcome back, everybody. We are going to be bringing our guest presenters back up on screen here in just a moment. 20 minutes goes fast, doesn't it?
It's great to see everyone's faces now. Hello.
I know, it's nice.
Yeah.
Let's see. There we go. Great. Well, Jason is spotlighting the rest of the other Beth, and bringing her back on screen as well. Did anybody want to share some of the conversation that happened inside the breakout room? Any themes or overarching ideas that you found interesting that you want to share?
We
mean,
talked
one
mostly
person
about
in
how
our
to
group.
engage younger people.
Oh, okay.
We had no solutions.
But you had a conversation about it.
Yes, except to sort of enhance the value of making handmade in our schools. We talked quite a bit about that.
Great. And Jamie Ann, what were you going to say? I know you had something you wanted to weigh in on.
Oh, someone had said something that made me think about potential innovation and deacquisitioning, personal deacquisitioning, which I think could be very interesting. I mean, what Anna is saying, what if we had people who were willing to deacquisition to collectors, young collectors, at half the cost of a piece, or maybe would be willing to gift a piece to a younger collector so that they have the opportunity to grow their own collection or learn more about stewardship and legacy. So that's kind of exciting.
That is kind of exciting. It reminds me, it's the very first time I was the curator at the Houston Center for Contemporary Craft, and Sienna Patty, who runs a jewelry gallery in Massachusetts, came to the museum and brought her collection, and I fell in love with this brooch, and it was way out of my price range. And I had bought handmade items before, but probably $120 or less kind of pieces of mostly jewelry, or a lot of times because both myself as a glass artist, my husband is a jewelry artist, we do a lot of trade, right? So our collections often happen with trade. But I fell in love with this brooch, and Sienna said, we can make monthly payment arrangements to, slowly pay for that piece. And I think a lot of times we forget or embarrassed to ask to do that sort of thing. And Jamie, you brought that up a little bit in your conversation about collecting as well, but kind of encouraging people to know that there's alternative ways of figuring out how to collect, and bring in, pieces that are important or special to them. And then, yes, how do we continue to value or communicate the value of the handmade? I think is really important too. And getting people to understand why it's so expensive, right? Like that's the biggest number. I don't know if, do you all hear that when people are like, I talk about like a handmade mug and I spent $70, and people are like, who don't live in our world of craft are like, why did you spend $70 on a mug? And I was like, well, actually, I spent $70 on an artist. I just happened to get the mug as the reward for that. And really communicating that. So I think that's interesting. It came up, Anna, in your room, and Jamie, and I think the idea of thinking about out of the box ways to kind of really communicate to younger people how the value, and then how they can figure out ways, alternative ways to collect instead of just writing that big check or throwing over that cash.
Is there any sorry to interrupt, is there any organization in the US that helps people buy art? In Britain, they have I think it's called Buy Art. I don't remember, something like that. But you can actually, in most galleries and makers, have the little card, and it will connect you with this organization, and they will help you buy the art, and they work it through.
That's fascinating, Russell. I don't think I knew about that. So I need to do some more research on that. I don't think of any. Can anybody think of anything in the United States that does that?
No, the only thing I could think of that kind of helps with collecting, I think it's Future Fairs, that usually puts on a lot of artists' work and it's general art, but there's definitely craft objects in there that tend to be on a lower range, like a lot more affordable than if you were to go to any other art fair, basically. So there are things out there for if you're trying to just kind of splurge just once a year to slowly build a collection. I know I'm starting to do that. Like I feel like I'm in a place where I can slowly start building a small collection of artwork.
Yeah.
And I think at the Alliance, we do a lot of programming. So, people who are younger, when they first join our organization, they might not know a lot of artists. They start to get to know the artist, they start to buy. Well, then they don't know they should be documenting their collection. So then we talk about documenting. We talk about appraisals. We talk about the market and how you don't want to flood the market with items. And so we talk a lot about those things to better the legacy of our artists, because in many ways we are responsible not only for the piece in which we have, but the artist's legacy. And so that is a huge responsibility on collectors' shoulders, whether or not you know it by owning something or not.
No. And I think it was somebody put in there that they heard of a program years ago in the chat that they are not sure if it's still happening, but they think it was at Oberlin College, where the art museum there would rent out pieces of their collection to students so they could live with art pieces for a preset time frame, which is kind of interesting. Oh, and it looks like that, yes, it is still happening, and the link was also provided. So thank you. See, I love the attendees participating in these conversations too, because our collective knowledge might not be enough. We need the attendees also to share their knowledge as well. So that's great. And thanks, Rachel, for bringing that up. And thanks, Doreva, for finding that link. That's wonderful. Any other themes that you all want to talk about that happened in your breakout rooms? I know 20 minutes go so fast.
We talked about how you encourage young artists and collectors to start, but I'm more interested in young artists. And again, going back to Britain, Lisa Hammond has this program that she started called Adopt a Potter, and people donate money to it to support young potters in apprenticeships with other potters. A lot of you could be a potter making stuff, and you might want to have apprentices, but you can't afford to support somebody. to be an apprentice. And this program organizes that and does that. I don't know if there's anything like that in the States either.
Well, there is from the Arts Council. The North Carolina Arts Council has an apprenticeship program. And I know when I used to live in Virginia, they also had one. So, but it's in the form of a grant, which actually, you know, I'm a grant writer. I've written and managed so many grants, but it puts the onus on the artist to, it's troubling to me. I'm actually teaching a grant writing course for the arts next semester, but you know, not everyone wants to know how to write a grant. Not everyone, I know so many artists who that's like the last thing that they would really want to do. And we've created this system for gaining funds that is, you know, just sort of monolithic.
Yeah. So something that you all might not know, but each state has an apprenticeship program. It's run by most often the Department of Labor. The one in North Carolina is called Apprenticeship NC. There is one in Minnesota as well. They can be very robust and funded well or not so robust. So it just kind of depends. It goes state by state. Some of those programs do formally have what's called, they actually give you a journeyman card when you go through your apprenticeship program. And of course, this is an apprenticeship and it's very wide, right? It can be from pattern making to upholstery making to furniture making, or even just turning the legs of tables, to, of course, others apprenticeships outside of the craft arena. But we do not really have that same European apprenticeship model here in the United States that's done well or replicated well. So for us in North Carolina, the reason why we do have a formal craft apprenticeships is because we have that robust statewide apprenticeship program. It just depends on state by state. It's just kind of really interesting to think about that. But I've been doing a lot of conversations with our North Carolina one, as the many hats that I wear, and in supporting craft artists. It's something that I believe in, and I have wanted to figure out a way to replicate and then create a template that can be easily replicated by other apprenticeship programs in other states as well, because there is a lot of funding that can come from the Department of Labor. Both the Trump administration and the Biden administration has put a lot of money into the Department of Labor or Department of Commerce. It really kind of depends on the state where it lies. For apprenticeship programs, workforce development programs is another name that you may hear also used for those. But there is, like Anna said, a need for us to figure out additional systems to set up to encourage that kind of, learning and in that European model way, which I think is kind of interesting. So just a little piece of information. Oh, and Jamie Ann says it makes her think of a traditional patron model, right? Which is a little twist on the collector and contemporary twist on that investor, which is Patreon. So thanks for putting that link in there. That is, I know a lot of artists have found great support that way, and do find people who can support them. And get a little monthly stipend to help them, have the ability to make the work that they want to make. Any other last thoughts or comments, either from the guest presenters or any of the attendees that anybody wants to share?
I'd like to share one thought one concept that was brought up in our group was one of the participants talked about a website that he is in the process of creating that would help to bring forward artists within the craft field that would be juried, but would kind of get rid of the algorithms so that even a first or new artists, if they have excellent work that is recognized by their peers, that they can be invited into this to participate in this website and gain recognition that way. And then the more that they are engaged in that community, that website community, that would kind of help to bubble up their presence within the website. So Ephraim, if you're still on the call, am I representing that
Yeah.
correctly?
Rachel
Yes,
put it in the
thank you,
chat. WeMake.co, right? Is that correct?
Yes, that's right.
That's great. That sounds like a really interesting platform, and I'll look forward to digging into that and seeing how that continues to evolve. But thanks, Beth, for sharing that.
Sure.
That's great. Wonderful. Well, I feel like we could have added another hour into this conversation. Like the first talk, I think it's really fascinating to have these conversations. But I do want to thank everybody, both the attendees for participating in the breakout rooms and unmuting yourself even after the breakout rooms or putting your thoughts in the chat. I do want to thank the Wingate Charitable Foundation for funding and supporting these talks. And then last but certainly not least, Angelique, Anna, Jamie Ann, Tiffany, and Beth, thank you all so much for your time, your expertise and knowledge, your support, both of the ACC for being here, but also the craft community for what you do, for the stewards and legacy building that you all are doing kind of in your own special, unique way. I really appreciate you all being willing to share that with everybody and to continue that. And so thank you. It's such a gift for you all to take that time out of your busy lives to share that with everybody else. So I really appreciate that. So thank you for that. And for those of you, hopefully we'll see you for our last talk, which is next Wednesday, December 15th, from 1 to 3 p.m. Central Time or 2 to 4 Eastern Time. And if you signed up for this talk, you're automatically registered for next week's talk. So you'll receive an email next week with the link to join. And we look forward to seeing you there and continue our conversation now, moving into the creative economy and how that looks as we come out of the other side of a pandemic. And again, thank you all for being here today, and we will see you next week.